A filmmaking duo from Canada made an incredible discovery while gathering footage for their latest documentary project. For years, director-cinematographers Zach Melnick and producer Yvonne Drebert have been shooting stunning underwater footage to document a problem facing their native Great Lakes region. But on one day of work, instead of filming the invasive Quagga mussels as intended, their camera captured an amazing shipwreck, a discovery that might be the key to solving one of their homeland's darkest, most enduring seafaring mysteries. A nature documentary crew stumbled upon a shipwreck deep in Lake Huron. Before we dive into pun intended their incredible discovery, let's find out who Drebert and Melnick are. They're a Canadian documentary filmmaking double act, and they're also married. They co-founded Inspired Planet Productions to help them make the kind of projects they care about. Over the last 2 decades, they've produced an incredible 40 hours of nature and history documentaries. Prior to their current effort, their magnum opus was Striking Balance, a 17-episode journey through their native Canada. Charmingly, the couple were high school sweethearts, and they made their relationship work long distance through college. Drebert told Streets of Toronto, "Since we both went through post-secondary for the arts, it just seemed natural to work together when we'd finished our degrees, and we began picking up commercial work." She continued, "Zach was the camera operator, and I was on the sound team. At the same time, we were shooting documentaries which had us traveling across Ontario, which eventually led us to Striking Balance and the work we're doing today. Living and working together can certainly have its challenges, but Drebert and Melnick wouldn't have it any other way." She explained, "When you're spending several months at a time driving a van across the country making films, there is honestly not a lot of work-life balance." But she happily added, "The excitement and adrenaline make up for it, and our journeys are always really memorable because we're spending time at each location with people who are doing meaningful work. A lot of our films focus on subjects that interest both of us on a personal level, so it's easy for us to really dive in," Drebert continued. "We work together pretty much every day, but we generally like each other, so that makes it easy." She added, "We are very careful about each taking on roles that play to our individual strengths. And regardless of what happens with the project, at the end of the day we're still going to be there for each other, which gives us the strength to get through the hard times." Drebert revealed, "When we're up against big deadlines, it puts all of the little things into perspective. It's hard to get mad at each other for leaving socks on the floor when we're trying to create a 9-hour TV show in our basement. It's not all hard work and impossible deadlines, though." She smiled. "The challenge for us is really carving out time together that's not work-related. So, we do our best to head out in our canoe or hit the Bruce Trail without camera gear on a regular basis." After finishing Striking Balance, the husband and wife team looked somewhere closer to home for inspiration for their next project. They live in the Saugeen Peninsula and were keen to investigate the growth of a certain invader in the Great Lakes area, the Quagga mussel. The smallest can its close relative, the zebra mussel, isn't native to the region. Instead, it found its way into Canadian waters while attached to the bottom of ballast tanks in Russian and Ukrainian shipping vessels. According to Canadian Geographic, a single female Quagga mussel releases up to 1 million eggs each spawning season, although most do not survive. Even so, once the mussel arrived in the Great Lakes, it spread quickly, forming vast underwater colonies. They feed by filtering phytoplankton and other microscopic particles out of the water. Each 2-centimeter-long mussel clears up to 1 liter of water per day. These invaders are so plentiful in Lake Huron that they've depleted the plankton upon which native species also rely, with cascading effects up the food chain. Fisheries management biologist Ryan Lawson revealed, "It's certainly had some dramatic influences on absolutely everything that's going on in the lake. We see the effects of that every single day. For example, the local fishing industry has taken a huge hit because the quaggas feed on the same plankton that used to sustain the fish. Every time nets are dropped into lakes, they come back coated almost entirely in quaggas instead of fish." Lawson admitted, "It's become so difficult to make a living from fishing that most individuals have had to get out of it." The mission statement of Drebert and Melnick's documentary entitled All Too Clear was simple. They wanted to investigate the effects the Quagga mussels have had on the Great Lakes ecosystem and bring their findings to a mainstream audience. Fishery Commission Director Dr. Andrew Muir gushed, "The incredible footage captured by Inspired Planet Productions will help scientists communicate the issues associated with the re-engineering of our aquatic ecosystems that has unfolded over the past several decades as a result of Dreissenid mussel invasions." Interestingly, though, the unexpected discovery they made during filming actually shifted Drebert and Melnick's perspective slightly. They had been so focused on one aspect of the mussel's detrimental effect on the area that they'd completely ignored another. In their press release, Melnick said, "Before our work focused on the ecological impacts of the mussels which have devastated fisheries around the lakes." To his credit, he then admitted, "We hadn't considered the effect they could have on our cultural heritage. But the mussels have truly changed everything in the deep waters of the Great Lakes." Initially, work progressed smoothly on the documentary, but then things took an unexpected turn when the team got a strange message. Melnick revealed, "We received a tip that scientists doing an offshore fish survey had noticed an anomaly on their sonar readout, basically an unusual bump on an otherwise flat lake bed. The research team knew to contact them for a couple of reasons. Number 1, they were in the area making their documentary, but number 2, their RAV remotely operated vehicle camera is the best in the business. You see, the couple's camera Boxfish Luna is literally the most state-of-the-art underwater drone in the world. Manufactured by Boxfish Research, a company from New Zealand, the camera has been specifically picked for the documentary." As co-founder Craig Anderson said in a press release, Boxfish Research is excited to partner with Inspired Planet Productions to bring our underwater cinematography drone, the Boxfish Luna, to Canada for the first time for All Too Clear. Anderson continued, "The Inspired Planet team has been pushing the Luna to its full potential, and the video they are capturing from these important freshwater ecosystems is stunning." Indeed, as the Great Lakes Fishery Commission's Andrew Muir put it, All Too Clear is providing an unprecedented peek into the Great Lakes. He added that the crew is revealing important and never-before-seen information on the behavior of fish in their highly dynamic and rapidly changing environments. All this is to say that Drebert and Melnick were uniquely positioned to shoot amazing footage of the mysterious anomaly they'd found. Of the incredible camera, Melnick told the Owen Sound Sun-Times, "When we set out on this project we thought what's the best possible tool for us to kind of play James Cameron and get to the bottom of the lakes and show people what's happening there? This was the best tool." He was, of course, making a knowing reference to legendary Hollywood director James Cameron, who has become equally as famous for his underwater explorations as he is for directing all-conquering blockbusters like Titanic and Avatar. Armed with the location of the anomaly from the fisheries scientists, we packed up our robot, grabbed some friends and their dog, and headed out on what we thought would be a fun Saturday boat ride, explained Drebert. The couple didn't truly expect to discover much of anything. In fact, Drebert chuckled, "We honestly expected to find a pile of rocks. Instead, they found something which shocked everyone and led to the couple hitting the headlines while nabbing some free publicity for their documentary." As the crew sailed into position on that fateful Saturday afternoon, the weather was making the water extremely choppy. It meant everyone was in a pensive mood, far from the fun afternoon Drebert had imagined. Still, they pressed ahead, and Melnick began remotely operating the RAV from their boat's nerve center. As it slowly descended the 280 feet to the lake floor, the curious filmmakers questioned whether or not their effort would be worth the trouble and soon received an emphatic answer. Drebert told the Sun-Times, "The robot gets to the bottom of the lake and surprise, there are mussels. So, I'm thinking, oh great, let's go back, this is going to be nothing." Melnick, who was looking at what the camera was seeing via a fiber optic cable, could see something silhouetted in the distance, though. He admitted, "It's like, okay, that could be a pile of rocks or something." Then it very slowly came into view and became obvious it was a shipwreck in incredible condition. "We were down for only a few minutes when a huge structure loomed up from the depths," explained a stunned Drebert to the Express. No one could quite comprehend what they were seeing, as Drebert confessed, everyone on board was floored, and more than one expletive was thrown around. She continued, "We really couldn't believe our eyes. The ship is in pristine condition, sitting upright on the lakebed, as though it's just fallen straight from the surface and is resting on the bottom. While everyone tried to get a good look at the sunken vessel, it soon became obvious that it wasn't going to be easy to identify it. That's because the subject of the documentary and the ghostly ship had aligned in an ironic way. The vessel was entirely covered from front to back in quagga mussels. It was a strange sight to see such a large structure encrusted with tiny organisms, and if there are quadrillions on the bed of the Great Lakes, then there were easily thousands attached to the ship. Ironically, though, the quaggas themselves were the very reason the filmmakers were able to get such a good look at the ship. Drebert told the Express, "There are so many quaggas filtering the Great Lakes that the lakes are up to 3 times as clear as they were before the mussels." She continued, "The quaggas are the reason we're able to see the shipwreck in almost 300 feet of water without any additional lights. But they're also responsible for making wreck identification in the Great Lakes incredibly difficult." The quaggas didn't just make it hard to ascertain the name of the vessel, though they were also doing it considerable damage. Drebert revealed, "The quagga mussels are slowly but surely causing the deterioration of the ship." She continued, "They have small, hairy protrusions called byssal threads which they use to attach themselves to surfaces, working their way into wood, which causes deterioration. In some cases, the weight of millions of mussels can cause ship components or even whole vessels to collapse." In order to find out the name of the vessel and unlock the key to its history, though, the couple had to bring in some experts. They went to marine archaeologist Scarlett Januses and historian Patrick Folkes, who told them they first needed to attain their own Ontario archaeological license. Once that was secured, they piloted the ROV back down to the shipwreck to measure its dimensions and film it in more forensic detail. Thankfully, clues to its identity soon began to emerge. The first thing that jumped out at the filmmakers and the experts was the sheer size of the wreck. At 148 feet long, 12.5 feet high, and 26 feet wide, it was a truly impressive vessel. The second major clue was that there was a debris field scattered on the seafloor surrounding the ship, and it was identified as coal. The experts had already suggested the Africa, a cargo ship that sank in 1895 on its way to Owen Sound, Ontario, as a strong candidate, and this sealed the deal. On October 4, 1895, the steamship Africa left Ashtabula, Ohio, bound for Ontario, and it had a barge known as the Severn towing behind it. Both ships were loaded to the gills with coal, 1,270 tons, to be exact, but neither would make it to the destination. 2 days after setting sail, a storm reared its head near the Saugeen Peninsula. Captain Hans Larsson went out on deck in the afternoon and was greeted by freezing cold, whipping winds and then snow. By 7 o'clock on that second day, the gale force winds had torn the Severn's sail, and both ships were struggling. Larsson had an uncomfortable decision to make, but he acted quickly, ordering his men to cut the tow line between the Africa and the Severn. That ship's captain, James Silversides, later told the local newspaper, "Captain Larsson either thought that we were sinking or his vessel was foundering. I think it was the latter, because he is a grand fellow and would never have deserted us if he thought we were in a bad way." As night fell, the crew of both ships tried their best to keep the vessels afloat in the roiling waves, but the distance between them, without the tow line, simply kept getting bigger and bigger. Soon, the Severn could barely see the Africa as it chugged through the choppy waters half a mile in front of them in the darkness. Horrifyingly, the Africa then totally disappeared from view. Silversides sadly admitted, "That was the last we saw of her." The Severn soon smashed into the Bruce Peninsula's western shoals and ran aground. Thankfully, the crew had made it to dry land, but the ship was wrecked and rescue was far from certain. There was only one thing for it. They started a fire in the hold with the coal they were hauling and warmed their soaking wet, cold bodies by the flames. To their relief, rescuers came the following morning, and every member of the Severn made it home alive. The Africa wasn't so lucky, though. It disappeared beneath the waves, with all 11 crew members presumably perishing in the process. All that was found was the lifeboat and a batch of letters written by the cook. Silversides lamented, "I tell you that I have passed through some bad weather during my 35 years as sailing, but that experience upon Lake Huron is as bad as any." Captain Larsson was a splendid fellow to sail with, and he did all he could in this case to prevent what happened. 2 days later, 2 bodies from the Africa were actually discovered. One was found by fishermen and was wearing a life jacket emblazoned with the ship's name, and the other was only wearing an undershirt and had a nasty bruise on his head. This was wheelsman James King, and Silversides revealed that he was the crew member on watch the night the Africa became lost. He theorized that the poor man had jumped from the deck into the icy waters in a vain attempt to swim for safety on the shore. In the year following the Africa's disappearance, items from the ship periodically surfaced. The chief engineer's trunk washed up on land. It held his clothes and a collection of letters from his beloved daughter. The cook's trunk was also found, as were Captain Larson's hat and letters from his family. The year after that, 3 more bodies turned up along the coast: Larson, shipmate William Anderson, and an unidentified crew member. It's believed this man was either Richard Brennan or Peter Brady, who weren't on the official manifest. For the next 128 years, though, the Africa sat at the bottom of Lake Huron, waiting for Drebert and Melnick to stumble upon its remains. The shipwreck can't be officially designated a gravesite, though, until actual human remains are discovered within it, although most observers believe these will be found as soon as the wreck is explored. Historian Patrick Folkes told Canadian Geographic, "It's a human tragedy, those lives were lost. I always think of those poor sailors. They had pretty tough lives and ended up getting drowned in Lake Huron." Drebert was able to tell the Express about her understanding of the moments before the ship was swallowed up by the waves. She revealed, "The Africa sank during an early season snowstorm. Intense winds would have been pounding the ship, driving it into the trough of the waves, and causing it to take on water." She added, "In our video we can see that there is some hull damage to the ship, however that could have been caused by the ship settling on the lakebed. Most likely, it was taking on water that brought the Africa down." Interestingly, though, the Africa is far from the only sunken wreck which has been infested with quagga mussels. Tamara Thompson, a maritime archaeologist from Wisconsin, told CBS News, "What you need to understand is every shipwreck is covered with quagga mussels in the lower Great Lakes. Everything? If you drain the lakes, you'll get a bowl of quagga mussels." Before 1989, the crystal clear water in the area would have preserved wrecks almost perfectly. But in the 30 years since quaggas were discovered, the situation has gone from bad to worse. Fellow archaeologist Wayne Lusardi revealed that sunken planes are also in the firing line. He explained, divers started discovering in the 1960s and 1970s. Some were so preserved they could fly again. Now when they're removed the planes look like Swiss cheese. He added that the small mollusks have an insatiable appetite and are literally burning holes in ships and planes with the acid they excrete. And they burrow so deeply into wood in such thick layers that hulls and decks can be crushed. Historian Brendan Baylod revealed that he found the remains of the Trinidad schooner which sank in Lake Michigan in 1881, and it wasn't a pretty sight. The ship hadn't been subject to a crush yet and was in fairly good condition, but he lamented, "It has been completely colonized." He explained, 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, that site would have been clean. Now you can't even recognize the bell. You can't see the name board. If you brush those mussels off, it tears the wood off with it. Some may ask why the damaging of some sunken wrecks is cause for such concern, but historians feel that losing the ability to find and explore these vessels would actually be incredibly sad. Baylod mused, "When we lose those tangible, preserved time capsules of our history, we lose our tangible connection to the past. Once they're gone, it's all just a memory. It's all just stuff in books." In truth, many of these vessels were integral parts of the maritime industry, which was so instrumental in putting the Great Lakes area on the map, so they have historical and sentimental value. It all begs the question: can anything be done to combat the proliferation of quagga mussels? The answer is, unfortunately, yes and no. There are options which include poisoning them with toxic chemicals, starving them of food and water, by smothering them in tarps which lessen water flow significantly, adding carbon dioxide to the lake in order to suffocate them, or bringing a natural predator into the ecosystem. Unfortunately, though, Dr. Harvey Bootsma of the School of Freshwater Sciences at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee told CBS News that none of these options are actually viable on a mass scale. At the end of the day, despite the negative impact of the unprecedented mussel invasion, both Drebert and Melnick see cause for optimism. In a press release, Drebert said, "There's a surprising twist that sets this story apart from those of other invasive species. The dramatic reduction of life in the deep waters has created an unexpected opportunity." She explained, "Right now, several experiments are underway to see if we can fill the vacuum created by mussels with native fish species that were sidelined by the impacts of settlement and other invasives long ago." Drebert concluded, "Ironically, Quagga mussels may have given us a chance to restore the ancient and unique ecosystem of the Great Lakes. But we must act now, before the gap is filled by a new invader." Now, before we conclude, there's one final surprise in this tale. Drebert and Melnick live in Larsen Cove, which was named after Hans P. Larsen, the lost captain of the Africa. Oh, and the Severn's crash location was only a few hundred meters from their home. Perhaps it was fate that they would be the ones to find the shipwreck? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.